In the next problem, we will see the question number 16 is like, we will be using the same data and we need to extract one more column as eligibility column. And the eligibility on the basis of their credit and debit transactions. See, whenever a customer is doing a credit, then by default it is an eligible transaction. But whenever a customer is doing a debit transaction without having any amount in those particular accounts, then that transaction is not eligible transaction, right? So we need to assume all transactions are starting date and there is no account before they on the starting. See, there is no transaction before done by this particular user ID and assume those account balances are zero only. Okay, now if you consider this user ID one, this is credit, so it is returning as eligible. And if you see the second user ID, his amount is 500, he is doing a debit transaction. See, there is no amount before for user ID 2, so you need to return this as not eligible. Okay, and for the second one, I mean this user ID, you can see here this is again credit, so it is eligible. Now you see a 3, that is debit, so there is no account balance for user ID 3 before, so you should return not eligible. Likewise, you need to return one more column as eligibility column that we solved in the next problem, that is question number 17. If you have interest, please comment it that query. Okay. Hello everyone, welcome to Me Lab Studies. In this video, we are going to solve one more SQL problem as part of Data Analyst Data Engineer interview preparation. That is question number 16. Return the number of total transactions and percentage of credit and debit transactions done by each user. And we have given a transaction table with different columns and their respective data types. Those columns are user ID, transaction date, transaction ID, amount, and type of transactions. Now we need to find out the total number of transactions done by each user and percentage of credit transactions and percentage of debit transactions done by each user. Okay, now we will start writing SQL queries. Now you can see here I have created a transactions table and I have inserted a data into those particular that particular transaction table. Now if I execute this one, you can see here this is the data having total of 20 records. These 20 records are indicating that a total of 20 transactions done by different users. Okay, now we need to find out the total number of transactions done by each user, and we need to find out the credit type or debit type transactions percentages by each user. Okay, now I'm going to find out total number of transactions done by each user. Okay, so I have to use user ID and I need to find out the count. This total count is nothing but these 20 are different transactions, right? Because of this transaction ID is a primary key. Okay, this primary key means this transaction ID should not be a duplicate and it should not be null, so we can ensure that this transaction ID is distinct value. So those are total number of 20 records are there, therefore these 20 are 20 different transactions, right? Now I'm going to find out the count star is nothing but number of transactions. From transactions table, right? Now we need to use group by, right? Group by each user ID. Now if I execute this one, you can see now you can see here for each user ID their respective number of transactions. One is 4 number of transactions, 2 is 4 number of transactions. There are 5 users and total of 20 transactions. 4 by each, right? Each user have done 4 transactions. Now we need to find out the percentage of debit transactions and credit transactions, right? Now we need to find those two values also, and before solving those two, we will find how many transactions are debit, how many transactions are credit. Okay, now we need to count off, I mean, in order to find out those particular transactions, we need to use conditional statement because of we are using some filtering conditions which of different types, right? So we will be using conditional statements and then we will count the number of transactions, right? Now I'm going to use count of case when type is equals to credit, then I'm going to return transaction ID, that particular transaction ID. Okay, and then if not, else, that is null. Okay, I'm going to end this as credit transactions. Okay, now similarly I'm going to count the number of debit transactions. count of case when type equal to debit, then I'm going to return transaction ID else null. End it as debit transactions, right? Okay. Now if I execute this one, you can see here these are number of transactions done by each user. These are number of transactions done by each user. Those are transactions are credit transactions, and these are debit transactions, number of debit transactions. You can see here our user ID 1 done 4 transactions, and in those 4 transactions 3 are credit transactions and 1 are debit transactions. Likewise you can see all transactions. Okay, this is total number of transactions, this is number of credit transactions, and this is number of debit transactions. But now we need to find out the percentage of credit transactions and the percentage of debit transactions, right? Now I'm going to assign this as CTE, and then I'm going to return c dot user ID, c dot number of transactions, and then we need to find out the percentage of credit and the percentage of debit transactions, right? Now in order to find out the percentage of credit or debit, we need to use credit transactions by total number of transactions, right? Now we'll use credit transactions by c dot number of transactions, right? That is total number of transactions done by each user only, right? Okay, now we need to use here c dot, because of I'm going to refer city as c, comma this as credit transaction percentage. Oh, I'm referring as a credit percentage. Okay, now comma same we need to find for debit, right? Debit transactions divided by c dot number of transactions as debit percentage of transactions, right? I'm going to refer this as debit percentage from CTEC. Okay, now if I execute this one, you can see these are the zero values because of we are not multiplied with any value, so that is taking only integer, right? We need to return the percentage of debit and credit transactions, right? Now we need to multiply this one with 100 and this one with 100, right? Now if I execute this one, you can see here this is a credit transactions percentage and this is a debit transactions percentage. Okay, if you want to get the percentage symbol, we will use concat of this one, and then we'll use percentage symbol. Okay, same here also, concat of this one and comma percentage symbol. Okay, now if we execute this one, you can see here the percentages, right? I hope you understand this one. Now we will solve by using another method. Okay, now we have solved differently, right? I mean differently finding the number of transactions, I mean credit and debit transactions, right? Now we will find by using different method. Okay, I'm going to find count of returning user ID comma count of star as num transactions, I mean total number of transactions, comma I'm going to write conditional statements here and then counting it up, count of case when type equal to credit, then I'm going to return transaction ID else null, end it as. Okay, now this is number of credit transactions, right? Now if we divide it by this with count star, that will return the percentage of, I mean, if we multiply it with 100, then that will return the percentage of credit transactions, right? Similarly, count of case when type equal to debit, then I'm going to return transaction ID, else null, end it as. Now, see, before ending, see, we need to use count of star. See, this represents the number of transactions is divided by the total number of transactions, right? Now, if we multiply here with 100, that will return the percentage of debit transactions, right? Here also, if you multiply with 100, that will return the percentage of credit transactions. Okay. Now, this I'm refer this as credit percentage. Okay. This as debit percentage. Okay. From transaction tables, right? Okay. Now, for execute this one, you can see here what is the error. Transaction that user ID is invalid. See, we need to use here, we are going to find for each user, right? So we have to use group by user ID, right? Okay. Now, if we execute this one, you can see here for each user ID, the total number of transactions and the credit transactions percentage and the debit transactions percentage. You can see if you add up these two values, it should return 100, right? See, 50, 50, 100, 75, 25, 100, 25, 75, 100. Likewise, you can see this is the percentage of credit transactions and this is percentage of debit transactions. Similarly, if you want a percentage, if you can use concat. Okay. These are the two methods that we can solve this problem. Okay. I hope you understand this problem. And thanks for watching, and don't forget to like and share. Thank you.